So Class of '09 recently announced a new game and the fourth entry in the title. So for a while we did know after the flip side, the fourth game in the franchise wasn't going to be a visual novel and instead will take a new direction with the franchise. A lot of people thought it meant an RPG or even a shooter where you shoot up the school as Jeffrey for some reason. I personally thought it was going to be an RPG, mostly because RPGs can be made very easily with tools like RPG Maker, similar to visual novels. RPGs can also have a lot of visual novel elements to it and can allow for multiple routes, while also offering more gameplay for players to engage in. Because one of the main criticisms for Flipside is that it barely had any actual gameplay even by visual novel standards. As such, you're better off watching it on YouTube. There was also the fact that RPGs have been used to make similar games like Class of '09. I can think of two examples, both of which are ironically FNAF related, Day Shifts at Freddy's and Five Nights at Fuckboys. With the former, if you don't want to do a traditional RPG, it proves that you could still use RPG engines to make a good comedy and gameplay without using any RPG element, except for the third game. With the latter, it shows that even with a traditional RPG, you can make a funny game by fighting inanimate objects and using dialogue for comedy, which in Class of '09's case could have a lot of potential. So the game gets announced and it's a puzzle game. Credit where credit is due though. The artwork in the game looks amazing. I like the new illustrations of the character, especially Nicole. She looks very pretty and cool in this frame. And even Crispin looks nice with the new style. Though I won't deny I do kind of like the old sprites of the characters and the old anime rough art style. Hopeless. Franchises switch genres all the time, and this game can be considered more like a spin-off. And spin-off games typically are free game on what the genres can be. Mario, for example, is mainly a platformer, even Sonic. But their spin-offs can be educational or you could be racing. Even if you don't want to treat it as a spin-off, many franchises change their core genres and gameplay and still thrive. FNAF got popular because it wasn't a first-person roaming game where you ran from monsters, and people thought it was unique. Now FNAF is a first-person roaming game where you run away from monsters, and even now those are the best selling games in the franchise. There's also multiple campaigns. You can play as other girls like Callie and have different campaigns. The game could compensate for the change of genre through story and comedy and character building. We could learn more about the other girls, their backstories and their way of thinking and their beliefs and thought processes. Since the first three games mainly focused on Jekka and Nicole, with Ari and Emily getting dedicated routes, but you could still learn a lot from this game about them, and character building is still character building. And if the comedy is as good as it was in the first two games, indubitably the third, it could compensate for this. However, if I'm gonna be honest, that's just wishful thinking. For starters, not only does CBN3 now have to manage dialogue, story, and comedy, which he struggled with the third game, but also gameplay. The thing about visual novels is that they're just interactive books with more visual stimuli. The gameplay isn't much of an issue because it's mainly used to tell a story, and the gameplay is literally just clicking and choosing different paths. If the visual novel doesn't have different routes, even less because you could just put the game on auto. However, with puzzle games, they aren't as easy to make as you may think. A good puzzle game needs to have good difficulty progression and of course has to be fun to play. It's gonna be difficult to handle both gameplay, comedy, and storytelling at the same time. Those are three things. CBR3 struggled with something as simple as the visual novel format. Now I'm not saying it can't be pulled off, it most certainly can. But there's also the fact that many people have concerns that CBN3 specifically can't pull it off. He has a bad track record. For example, one of the reasons Flipside was so bad is because it was never meant to be good. CBN3 was bad that the game he made, which was meant for millennials, was filled with Gen Z people who just played the games and did stuff he found cringe, such as Jekka and Nicole being shipped and lesbian headcanons of the characters. So Flipside was basically a big fuck you to his own fandom. Not only that, the dude is very rude to his own fans and is unable to take criticism. From what I've heard, he actually wants to act like Nicole or a character from the series. And to that I'll say, first of all, that's just peak Reddit behavior. Secondly, what's funny and cool in a fictional exaggerated setting is not okay to do to real people. He also allegedly tried suing someone for talking against him and defaming the franchise. I don't know how you can defame a video game, but alright. Though, take it with a grain of salt. Because the person is from Reddit and we know how often people on Reddit make up stories. Furthermore, the original poster also added a GoFundMe link, so it could be very much a grift. There's also no evidence that a legal case is happening, no documents were shared, and no way to verify it. So remember, it's all alleged. So yes, I can get why people think this game will not be good when it's being made by someone like that. Also, an off-topic tangent, but I gotta hand it to CBN3. I've never seen a fandom of an indie game hate its creator this much. I can understand when it happens to corporations like Nintendo, but I barely see this kind of resentment for indie devs, except for maybe Yandere Dev. Most notable, indie dev creators like Toby Fox are still very respected. I don't think I've even seen him get hate from the anti-woke crowd that often, and his games are the definition of something they'd hate. Even Scott Cawthon, even when he had his own scandal over donating to certain political figures, he still had a lot of supporters, even for people who didn't agree with him politically. So I think CBI3 really did something substantial here, when majority of his fan base doesn't like it. Speaking of which, it gets me to the final point. Whether CBN3 likes it or not, I don't think this game will satisfy the fanbase. The genre jump is simply just too big. Tell me, when you think of a Class of 09 fan, do you think someone who literally wants to play a Candy Crush clone but with Class of 09 characters? Of course not. Even the Jeffrey fans probably wouldn't like that. Let's be real here. Majority of the fanbase are not gonna enjoy a jump from a visual novel comedy to playing Tetris with anime girls. It's not like an RPG where it still has visual novel elements like character sprites, dialogue boxes, choice making, and multiple endings. Where if he had switched to an RPG, it wouldn't feel off. It would still be Clash of 09, but with more gameplay mechanics. But this is just something entirely different and a very big transition from the style people are used to. I've already seen people have negative reaction to it and calling it a Candy Crush ripoff. Me personally, I do agree to some extent. I don't mind puzzle games, but this isn't something I want from Class of 09. There are numerous other genres and directions this series could fit in, but a puzzle game isn't one of them. My personal prediction is that unfortunately I think this game might flop, even worse than Flipside. Only a small portion of the fanbase is gonna like it, and only a smaller fraction will buy the game. The rest will just watch it on YouTube because they solely care about the campaign, not the puzzle game aspects. And also, they probably don't want to support CBN3 because of the things I mentioned, and I also think there's a lot of other allegations on him, which I think is also valid. Anyways, this is the end of the video. I just wanted to talk about Class of 09 in a non-satirical way and share some of my thoughts. If you guys have any thoughts on the game it's gonna turn out, and do tell me. And also let me know what your ideas for a non-visual novel version of Class of 09 is. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and see you guys in the next one. Peace!